We had Apple stores in the UK and Ireland, and then we also had the Apple and Bang & Olufsen stores in Selfridges. So those 7 years helped us to grow the business. From it was going from 17 to 35 when I joined. We're now up to 210 million within those 7 years. So rapid growth, and as a result of that rapid growth, rapid personal growth as well.
Firstly, thanks very much for joining me.
You're very welcome.
So looking at your career, right, to date, what I see is you kind of started off as a creative, and then you've gone from a kind of film production background in college, and what some people might not know about you is that you were a magician for years, a children's magician as well as everything else, and then you were a creative director, and then you've ended up in business. And from the outside in, looking at that seems like it was a transition. And what my first question is to you is, I'm wondering whether it felt like a transition or whether it was kind of all interlinked in some way.
Yeah, I've asked myself that for about 20 years too. So I'm not sure I can give you the right answer, but I can certainly give you the journey to it. I certainly started off with one thing, and I ended up in a completely and utterly different place. And I definitely don't think when I was starting off as a 19-year-old, I was expecting to be an MD at the age of 44. I think, though, if I look back and you really try to analyze what happened in my life and what's going on, definitely elements of each part of what I was doing at a different age certainly led me to this role. But I'd have to explain all that to even bring it together.
Well, let's start with magic and being a magician, because I think that's how I know you.
Yes.
So I think it's a good place to start, and I think it's probably a basis for what came next.
Yeah. Okay. So I think how do you get into magic? That's a question everybody used to ask me, and I was like, I don't really know how I got into magic. It wasn't a labor of love, but I think it was Paul Daniels. So when I was a kid, Paul Daniels was on the TV. And it was a real true piece around. There was no internet, so magic was real magic. And when you watched on TV, you had to wait for a week for it to come up because, there was no recording, and that's what it was. So I think I got my first Paul Daniels magic set at Christmas from Santa when I was 10 or 11. And I did my first magic show the following day, which is the number one rule that you don't do as a magician is you don't go out and just do the trick. The following day, you're supposed to, practice and rehearse. So my impatience is definitely the one example of what leads into where I got to. So I go out into the garden, I do a magic show to all the neighbours, and I have a little magic hat on. And I think they all figured out the tricks within the first 4 seconds because I didn't practice them. So it starts there. I'm thinking at about the age of 14 or 15. And this is how we met a long, long time ago. I joined the Irish version of the Magic Circle called the Society of Irish Magicians. So a 14-year-old now beginning to find his own way in school and everything else. Got into performing magic, and it was a labor. Then it became a labor of love. I'm not sure if it was an ego thing of standing up in front of people and liking the attention of it, but it became a labor of love. And by the time I got to transition year in school, we were doing work experience, and there was a guy, in my world, one of the most famous Irish children's magicians around in Dublin, and he was performing. He was legendary for performing. His name was Quentin Reynolds, and I walked up to him one day and I said, "Hey, Quentin, I have to do some work experience in about a month. Can you give me a job?" And he said, "No, sorry, I can't, because I work on my own." I think he misunderstood me, because at the time, I think he thought I was looking for a full-time job and that I was to leave school and go work for him. I literally was just looking to be a magician's assistant for 2 weeks and get out of school as part of work experience. So about 6 or 7 months later, he came back to me and said, "You know what, I've been thinking a lot about how brave it was for you to come and ask me." And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "Would you like a job?" And I said, "I would love a job, but I have to stay in school." He goes, "No, there's a weekend job, and you can do back then it was called balloon modeling, basically making balloon animals for kids." He says, "I'll teach you, I'll train you, and I'll put you out there, and you can start working for me." So luck was phase one. He misunderstood the request. I was looking for 2 weeks to work for free, and I got a paid job out of it in school. And that manifested then for about 5 or 6 years, where I started off doing balloon animals, and then I moved into, he started to train me how to do magic shows. So I ended up working in corporate gigs at the weekend and large shows for 700-800 kids, and ended up working on the Irish Ferries boat, going to France, being a children's entertainer. And I think the foundation of learning how to deal with people all came from that. That was the first phase. When I asked him many years later, I was like, why did we start with balloon animals? Why did we just jump in and just do a show? He said, because you're going to learn crowd control. And he said, more importantly, people control. And actually he says, more importantly, parent control. And he said, imagine you got 50 and 20 people in a queue, and Mary jumps up to the front of the queue and skips everyone else who's waiting 30 minutes. How do you deal with that aggressive parent? And as a 17-year-old, you never think about that, but translating that, eye contacts, body language, tone of voice, everything you were doing with dealing with that parent, it was transformational. It was amazing because he taught me how to deal with a crowd, would talk to you directly, but not make eye contact with you, which meant you didn't think I was talking to you directly, about getting back in line and doing what you're told. It all sounds tiny, right? That sounds really, really small. But that's where it all started, right? So put myself through college, doing magic shows at the weekends, sometimes with a hangover, and it wasn't always great. But so I went to college, and I ended up doing film and television. And I studied in the National Film School in the Institute of Art, Design and Technology, and loved it. Specialised in production. So I specialised in the producer. Set up at that time during college my own small little production company. Did a couple of really great corporate gigs at the time. We did we did a documentary on the Ryder Cup, and that went out on TV3 at the time, and that was a huge honor.
Did you think at that time that you'd become a journalist, or kind of, you'd go into TV production? Or
honestly, I hadn't a clue. At that time I thought production might be it, and then I believe you make your own luck, but a lot of lucky things started to happen, and as we go through, as I rethink everything, you'll see that every single part of this was by chance. Something happens, took the opportunity, and something new created, right? So at that time, I just finished college, the production, I think that's what I was doing. The Institute of Art, Design and Technology, the Leary Art College, where I was studying, had just created this new program called Film in Schools, the FISH. And it was a program where they were going out to primary schools and using film as a way of teaching them the curriculum. So script writing was creative writing in English, drama was acting in film, history, why don't we make a documentary? And all of a sudden made history fun. So they were looking for someone to be a creative manager at that time. And somebody put 2 and 2 together and got 57, because somebody said, well, we know a guy who was a magician and he studies film. Well, wouldn't he be really good to go in and do this? And sure, they were offering money, and I was like, as a guy who was looking for like a job at the time, said yeah. So I jumped into that for a year. I ended up being there for 8 years. And that was another piece of transformation that leads me to the next job.
Just for a sec, Ciaran, because it's interesting. I think there's 2 schools of people that I come across when doing these interviews, right? There's the very sure-headed, I know exactly where I'm going, and they almost kind of just carve out that path for themselves. And then you seem at the moment, right, to have fallen into another category where it was just, I'll just do what I enjoy and we'll see where that ends up. Is that an accurate kind of depiction?
100%. I, rightly or wrongly, naively or not, I always had the view that if I didn't enjoy working, I would stop. Right? Now, that didn't explain where money was going to come from to pay for rent or anything else, but it was a view that I had to love working, and I still do to this day. I love working, and sometimes probably too much, and maybe I'd have to get that balance of kids and at home and the thing. I love working. So back then, I got engrossed into designing and building out new film projects for schools. We did loads of amazing things, and then Apple caught their attention because we were using Apple technology, and not many people in Ireland were using Apple laptops in primary schools. So they kind of got very interested in what we were doing, and I got heavily involved with Apple while working in the program, and I ended up becoming a trainer for them. And very quickly, while working in the Film Schools program, I ended up traveling the world, everywhere from Russia to Africa to India, with Apple, explaining how to use Apple technology in education. And that was amazing. That was us getting up on stage and presenting to ministers of education around the world. It was the exposure was incredible. But I was only 26.
Your skill level at that point, because I actually remember you gave, it was the first lecture, if you want to call it that, in the Society of Irish Magicians. You gave a kind of a lecture on how to present, right? And how to how to present, but it was more kind of corporate. It was more, I suppose, what you were doing with these Apple presentations. And for example, something I still remember is you were talking about eye contact with the crowd and doing it. And I still use this in you do it as a Z, like the letter Z. You look along the back wall, then you go diagonally through, and it's perfect. You almost make eye contact with everyone in the room, right? I'm wondering, did you kind of learn things like that at this point, or was the magic kind of in the background here as well?
And this is what I was saying. Each part, if I look back, all stems from the previous part. It all came from magic. And even when I was telling you earlier about doing the balloon modeling and making eye contact as a 16, 17-year-old, that's how I learned it. And then that kind of morphed into, there wasn't just 20 people in a queue queuing for balloon animals. There was 300 people in the audience, and it was the exact same techniques, but it just morphed into a bigger audience, and you were tweaking it. So those presentations got bigger, and we were traveling a lot. And then my first child comes along, David, who's now he's 14 next week, but he comes along. And wives are amazing. Like, they are amazing. They can cut through you like very, very quickly and remind you of what's important, right? And Gem's wife, I distinctly remember this, and she probably would tell you she doesn't remember the conversation, was while we were doing all this traveling for Apple, she says, you do realize, like, out of the 4 or 5 months, you've been traveling for 2, and David's 8 months old. And I was like, no, I didn't. And that was a real home hitter to go, okay, what is important? And family was important, right? So at the time, because I was doing so much for Apple, there's an opportunity to leave the Institute of Arts, Design and Technology and all the education piece. And funny, right in the middle of that education piece, I went back and did a master's in education specialized in digital learning. So I was like, okay, this is where I'm going. And as soon as I finished my master's, Apple came along and said, would you like to come and work for us as a commercial manager in sales? Which literally just undid the master's and the use of it. But it meant I could do everything I was doing with Apple, the presenting and the meetings and everything else, but stay in Ireland. And so I took that job. So I went into Apple for 3 years as the commercial channel manager in Ireland, and my job was managing the Apple reseller called CompuB, and I was managing BT, British Telecom, because they were a corporate piece. And within 3 years, while I was managing the CompuB piece, the owner at that time was stepping down and was looking out for a CEO. And I remember the meeting distinctively where we met, and he said, look, I'm thinking of looking for a CEO. And I was saying, that's a really good idea. You know, it's really, really good. I'll help you, and I'll go and we'll help you find it, because I think the opportunity is awesome and it's huge for CompuB to become the largest Apple reseller in Ireland. And he goes, no, I found them. I said, oh, that's really, really good. Who? And he goes, well, it's you. I want you to come and join CompuB. And I took the opportunity. I left, and I went in as CEO of CompuB at the time, and it was growing from 18 million to 22 million. I had 7 stores in the UK and Ireland, and it's hilarious if I think back now. I leave Apple thinking I know how to run a business, thinking I know how to manage people, thinking that I know what a P&L is. And on reflection, while I was in Apple, I never hired or fired anybody. There was somebody else running the accounts because it was such a big company. All I had to do was a sales target. I didn't actually have to do anything related to the commercials or negotiations or margin or even understand it. And I never actually managed anybody. And I left Apple thinking I could do all this, and went in as a CEO.
How old were you at that point?
I was 34.
And you must have been, obviously you were performing well in your commercial manager role.
Well, I like to think so. Yeah.
Well, if you were chosen,
yeah.
That role is really important, I think, in your story, because it's your transition from more education, speaking, performance, creativity in a way, and not that stuff isn't involved in your kind of career now, but that's your kind of transition directly into business. And I'm wondering, what was that like for you personally, and was there, I suppose, did that feel like a transition?
Yeah, I think being naive is an incredibly powerful tool on reflection, right? And ignorance is bliss is an incredibly powerful tool on reflection. Had I known anything of what I was signing up for, I probably would have wet the bed. right? But I went in probably as a 34-year-old, maybe slightly egotistically, going to become an MD, CEO of this business. Who wouldn't want to be one of those? But I had no experience, none. But one thing I did have was two beliefs in the world. Is because of the training and everything I did beforehand, I still believe and think and hope I'm a lifelong learner. As in, I'm always pushing myself to try and think. And that comes from imposter syndrome. And all MDs will talk about this, where they, at some stage of their life, not feeling that they're worthy to be in that role. So I was constantly trying to learn. So I very quickly went on a learning path, trying to learn. And then the second bit around the trying to learn was that I've always been very good at one other thing. And that other thing is being very good at knowing what I'm not good at. So acknowledging that and then hide it. And so I learned very quickly about surrounding myself with people who are good at those things. And so was a saving grace.
What are those things?
Well, there's loads of them. If you go back then, I had no training in business. Right, I did a master's in education and I did a film degree. Right, that's creative and artistic and pedagogical for education, but it's not finance and it's not accounts. I had no commercial knowledge other than probably charm, as in being able to do a deal. I had no management ability. That was enough not to become a CEO. Like there's enough there to go, Jesus, like what are you doing? But I've always had self-belief. So I've always thought, well, we can do this, right? So let's do it and let's go. And I just think now on reflection, I only got away with it because I was so naive. I mean, had I really sat down and thought about this, every single part of the reflection bit says, no, you're not able to do this. But so got through it. Started on a journey of running a business that was an Apple reseller and had a very, very strict relationship with Apple, and you couldn't do anything without making sure that you were in all of the right criteria and the goals and the aims of Apple because it was their brand. And we went on quite a rapid expansion plan over those 6 or 7 years. We ended up buying a reseller in the UK, and that made us a bigger presence in the UK. We had an Apple store in Selfridges in London at the time. And then we had an opportunity to acquire a franchise of Bang & Olufsen. For those who don't know, Bang & Olufsen was a very high net worth individual premium brand around TVs and audio. Like your TV was 25,000 sterling if you were buying it. Your speakers were 60,000. So it wasn't necessarily going to be in every household. But we had a vision that we had spent the 7 years of that time convincing people to buy an Apple over a Dell or a Lenovo. But that was traditionally an Apple was 4 or 5 times the price. So we certainly had skill sets to say, well, you were buying this TV, we're going to be able to upsell you to a bigger TV. So we went on that whole journey where we ended up also at that time taking over the whole technology floor in Harrods. So we were running all of the technology floor as a retailer in Harrods. We had the Bang & Olufsen stores in Windsor, beside Windsor Castle, all over the place. We had Apple stores in the UK and Ireland. And then we also had the Apple and Bang & Olufsen stores in Selfridges. So those 7 years helped us to grow the business. From it was going from 17 to 35 when I joined. We're now up to 210 million within those 7 years. So rapid growth. And as a result of that rapid growth, rapid personal growth as well.
Yeah. And that's actually, I wanted to ask you about that because you had said there about self-belief, which was obviously important for you, especially at the start. But then what did that kind of 7 years look like for you and how you kind of progressed? I'm assuming confidence was something that you might have grown in over that time.
Yes, and I often would then question whether that confidence is still not here yet. And what I mean by that is because if you're constantly reassessing yourself and you're pushing yourself to be a little bit better, then that confidence goes backwards sometimes, right? So, I mean, back then, I think it was a very lonely place. I went in and I'd never reported to a board before. So all of a sudden I was reporting to a board that had expectations of commerciality, HR, all of which I knew nothing about really at the time, learned very quickly and managed to navigate it. And so imposter syndrome definitely was real. Don't deserve to be here, shouldn't be here, I'm winging it. And actually, the more now I'm comfortable talking about it, and you talk to any MD or CEO, they all admit that is part of their world. So it was very, very quick for me to be able to try and find a cohort of people that I could get support out of. And I ended up joining an organization called YPO, the Young Presidents Organization. And that was fundamentally game changing for me as a person within my career. And because it teamed me up with the same peer of people now that I've been together with 6 years that are my mentors, but we're mentors to each other. So it's all MDs or CEOs, and they're all successful in their own right. They all try not to, we all don't bring an ego into the room, and you're allowed to be raw. And that became my board. I had my own personal board where I was able to bring things to. Because one of the things that I certainly felt when I was growing up as an MD, and I still think I'm growing up, it's a very lonely place. You're expected to have all the answers, and you don't. But you're expected to have them. And not having them sometimes feels like a sign of weakness, because then you're not the strong leader that everybody's looking for. And so you wear that on your shoulders a lot. So you have a huge amount of highs, but a massive amount of lows. And sometimes the lows are because you just haven't learned how to celebrate the little things, because you're always worried about what's next. So it was a tough journey, I think, from a commercial perspective. But then, you've got your family, and over that time, I have 4 kids are born, right? And that changes perspective, and that puts the whole world into a different piece. So an amazing time, family wise, amazing highs and loads of lows. And what was one of the big lows? Well, COVID hits. And I can tell you, being in retail is not the best place to be when COVID hits. And during this time, YPO taught me something, and it's a running joke because it's a Chinese proverb. But who knows if this is good, and who knows if this is bad? And I've started to live my life with that. So if something bad happens, the feeling tells me it's bad right now, but I don't know it's bad. I know I'm feeling it, that it's bad, but I don't know it's bad. And it could be a good thing, but I just have to wait and map it out, right? And so having that philosophy has really helped me to be calm in really what feels like dangerous moments in the commercial part, and not panicking. And so COVID hits for us, and I'm a professional manager, so I'm in there as a CEO, and it's disastrous for the business, and so disastrous that the business goes into examinership in Ireland right at the beginning of COVID, just due to not being able to get the stock all over the different countries, and not being able to sell it, and not being able to travel, and cash calls, and the whole thing becomes the lowest point of my commercial career. And you then learn what resilience is, or you think you know what it is, and we hear everyone talking about it. And the resilience for me, I think it only kicks in when something worse happens. Then you realize, oh, now I know what it is. And then something worse happens. You realize the last time you thought that was resilience, which that was harmless, because this is even worse. So there's all this going. So we end up in examinership, and I have a new job. My job is basically to work with an examiner for 100 days to see, can we find a new buyer for the business and to turn the business around. And that is a whole new experience. So you go from having a board that's no longer is your board because they're no longer involved, to a high court who tells you that there's an examiner who's now your boss. And because I'm not a shareholder and I'm a professional manager, I now work for the examiner. And we go through a journey of how do we bring this business out of examinership, and thankfully we did. So at the end of the 100 days, you present what's called a scheme of an arrangement, where the examiner backs one of many plans, and they back the plan that they feel has the most ability to survive and succeed and actually really grow. So he backed at the time an MBO, a management buyout. So there was 4 of us in the business, and we put a version together of a scheme of arrangement, and he independently assesses which ones he believes are the most viable, and the MBO was the most viable. And so 5 years ago, we bought the business, and the rest, as I say, is history.
So you went from being, as you call it, a professional manager to being an owner of this business through the examinership.
Yeah. And before that, someone who'd never hired or fired somebody. So, yeah.
And that's, I'm really interested in this point, because I knew you before you became a CEO, before you were even working as a commercial manager, right? I kind of knew you before you entered business. And to me, you didn't, I want to ask you the question is, do you think you were ambitious at that time?
Do I think I was ambitious at that time? I don't know if I'm honest. I mean, you could reframe it and say, of course I was. Look, sure, didn't I get to become an MD of something? No, I don't think I was ambitious. I was energetic. I was passionate. I had a love for for whatever I was doing. I always had a love for it. And that was always because I was lucky enough to believe, whether it was naive enough to think that it could actually always happen, but it did actually always happen, was as long as I love doing it, then I'm going to keep doing this job. And when I don't love it, then I need to change. And that kind of what it was, the passion that drove us all the way through. So I don't know if I was driven. I was definitely passionate, and maybe they're the same thing. I'm not sure.
Talk to me about, a little earlier on, you were talking about when your son was born and having that chat with your wife. You know, you've missed whatever percentage it was of his life so far, and that decision. Have there been many of those along the way in terms of family interacting with business?
Yeah, with all of the horrible things that's happened with COVID, there's been a lot of positive things that individuals have found out of it. And for me, I don't travel as much. I still go to the UK, of course I do. We've got a huge business over there. But we've all proven that doesn't fall over now if you're not physically present. And I think with COVID, now working from home and returning to work, a different conversation for lots of different complexities. But let's talk about different countries for a second. Is that different countries for me is that over time you just learn to trust people and trust that they've got it, and you don't have to physically be there. So by not doing that traveling, you're present. But that's also hard because there's two kinds of present. There's physically present and there's emotionally present. And that's the one I do struggle with. As in, you come home and you've 27,000 things, or you've got all those emails in your head, or there's a bad day at work. And how do you be present for the kids, just for the hour at least? And that's the one that I have to still work on the most. And there's little things that everybody has their own tricks. I try, and I'm not always good at it. I leave my phone at the front door, so I can't touch it. I physically can't touch it. And then that means then I am present. I'm etching to get back to it sometimes. But so they're the bits that I've tried to take away from that conversation with my wife about being present and being there. And at the same time, I also try and measure, well, if we do well, then you've got a financial piece coming in, and that financial piece will get a nicer holiday. So there's the pros of this. Yeah. But it's trying to not outweigh and keep making the excuse, we'll be more financial. Because then you just lean back into, well, you're less present, right? Because you're doing it. So I think that's the way it changed. But I would definitely say even now, like I'm busier now than I was 10 years ago, right? Just because there's more businesses that we bought and we put them in. It gets harder to be present. But what I have realized is it's very easy. It's a simple question. It's choice. Are you choosing to be present or not? Which means, am I allowing myself? And when you ask yourself at the very, very core, then you really very quickly wake up and go, Jesus, stop. You can just stop this right now, the second, and be. So that's what I try on. I struggle, but that's the bit. I think that the conversation over the years has stuck with me in the way of being emotionally present.
What's changed for you, if anything, since buying the business, rather than being a professional manager, since becoming an owner? Has it changed?
Oh yeah, I look at expenses all day. We're long it's funny, everything changes when it's your own money, right? It really, really, everything was changed when it's your own money. Even though you are the professional manager and it was your job in the first place, it takes a different context, right?
Do you think you're a better manager as a result
of being an owner?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I am definitely a different manager due to the journey I've gone on to get there. I think though, because of my attitude is, if I don't love the thing, I wouldn't be doing it. I think that's kind of hidden a lot of those bits anyway. I loved being the professional manager because I loved the job. The job is still the job. The different parts are, you're now a shareholder, and as a result, you have an uplift, and you've also got a downlift if it goes wrong. And you've got more at stake. But I think for me, what has not changed was fundamentally is, what do I want to do? As a person, as in, why buy from us? Are we significant in anything that we do, or are we just another clog on somebody's wheel? And I think for me, it's just, if we can turn the dial on every single part of our business, then it's meaningful. right? And we've got lots of parts of business. We have a DoD Electrical, and we can talk about how that acquisition came along. And we did an education.
Well, actually, I was going to say, so I want to come back to the MBO and your mindset at that stage. But could you first just give you said a few minutes ago, and the rest is history. Can you give just a quick summary, if you like, of what that history looks like and what's happened since the
post
MBO?
MBO?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So MBO was, let's say, nearly 6 years ago. We start on a journey where we rebrand all of the CompuB stores, and we had another brand in the UK due to a previous acquisition pre to COVID, but it was still part of the company. So we branded everything to Select. And Select was an acronym for a lot of the services that we wanted to be able to give her, which was around support, and expertise, the S&E. So we rebranded, and that was a journey in itself about taking all of our stores and trying to overnight change who you are, but not change your values. And that's quite difficult, right? So we still believe in our core values, but we have a whole new identity. And that was part one. So we do quite well. We bounced back in the first 2 years really, really successfully within out of examinership, and actually examinership is dead, right? And what I mean by that is that we're in such a good place that there is no fear. The fear always with examinership is the kind of company that comes out of it, stay out of it. And categorically, this was the case. Or so there was a nice pat on the back, to say, okay, we did save 600 jobs, right? And that was a big thing for us at the time. And and we've always thought about this even now. So sorry, to go back to your question about what has changed as being an owner. What's changed about being an owner is that I take personal responsibility that I have 600 mortgages to pay. That's what's changed. That's more personal, right? As well. So we come out of the examinership, we do the rebrand. It's going really well. We're growing with Apple. That's going really well. We grow with our B2B business. So we no longer just retail. We're selling to businesses at the Apple services, and we're selling to education in Ireland and schools and iPads. And then a couple of scenarios start to happen. We get a knock on the door, a private knock on the door to say, would you have any interest in acquiring DoD? And well, that's straight left field, right? So we're a mono brand, premium brand product that only sells one thing, and it's one of the best products in the world, right? From that perspective, and then there's an opportunity to buy a 60-year-old family business where my parents shopped there, and there's probably nobody who hasn't shopped in DoD at one stage, and has a legacy estate of 23 locations, and it's a multi-brand. It sells everything. It sells TVs, everything. And there's one of those moments where basically this was really interesting, because from the moment of the first knock on the door to 7 months later, the deal was done. It doesn't happen very often. So that wasn't 7 months of thinking about buying DoD. That was 7 months from thinking, agreeing, planning, thinking we can do it. Can we turn this around to the way we want it? Can we integrate it? I mean, in one sense, it was kind of like a reverse takeover. We were profitable, more profitable Select, and more revenue, but these were more retail estates, larger, more staff. So it was a quasi reverse takeover in that form. And so we went on a journey, and we built a vision of what we think and what we wanted DID to be. And it was to be in a more premium space. It didn't do digital, so it didn't do iPhones or Samsung or anything. So we wanted to get those into the stores so that they were famous for their white goods, washing machines and TVs. And if we brought in the digital, we'd have a new audience, a new coming into the stores. And as a result, you might get them also buying their washing machines in their first house. And so we went on a vision of buying DID. And 7 months later, we finished the acquisition. And about 2 months after that, we get CCPC approval, so Competition Authority approval, to acquire them. And so we now own DoD for just shy of 20 months. During those 20 months, we didn't stop. So we have an Apple business, we now have a DoD business, and there's lots of other things that have to happen. Another acquisition presents itself for us in the UK, where an education reseller in the UK wants to exit. The owners want to exit. And we do education in Ireland for Apple, but we don't do it in the UK. But we have Apple stores in the UK, and it just seemed like a natural bolt-on. So an opportunity presents itself. We run the numbers, we do a due diligence, and we acquired a company called JTRS in the UK about 9 months ago. And as a result, we've expanded our Apple education business in the UK as well. While that's all happening, you're still trying to run the business. You're getting cultural amalgamation. We've got DID, which is legacy around traditional TVs and white goods. So they're not necessarily always tech savvy, the style of the customers coming in. We have young, energetic people traditionally working in Select because they're passionate about the brands and they're very bright stores. We have a dark looking DID. We have an education business. And so then the rest of the history was, what do we do to take this to the whole new next level? And there's a third arm that is now being grown out of this, of something called DID Essentials, where we partnered with United Hardware. United Hardware is one of the largest hardware buying groups in Ireland, and they're guaranteed Irish. We're guaranteed Irish. They're Irish owned. We're Irish owned. We're very proud of that. And the idea of working with other local businesses was a really big thing for us. So we've developed a model where we're working with Home Value, which is the brand under United Hardware. And in selective stores, we're going in and we're installing mini DID essential stores where you can buy all your essentials in rural areas. And so we're growing the footprint to, by the end of December this year, our brand will be on 51 locations in the UK and Ireland.
Wow. And you've what can you talk about the kind of revenue now and the number of people that you have?
Yeah, so the group revenue, so for the whole business last year closed out at 312 million. So that's the kind of journey that we went on in 10 years, from going into a business of not hiring or firing that was doing a very significant number. It was 17 and rapidly growing up to that 30 million number, to then taking it to a UK Irish presence and getting it to 312 million. And there will be probably significant growth this year and next year as well, as I think we're only starting.
On the integration piece, you haven't changed the DID electrical branding, I noticed. So you've got different cultures, but you also have different brands. How much are you integrating them, and how much are you kind of leaving them alone?
Yeah, so you ask all those questions in the very, very beginning, and you come up with right and wrong answers, and then you're trying to figure out which one fits. So the first problem we had was that when you look at DID Electrical, it's a family household name. Most people know it. And then you look at Select, which was a rebrand. Very few people knew the rebranded name. So you certainly weren't going to put the Select logo over the DID logo. And then the DID logo was a multi-brand, multi-vendor, sells a lot. You weren't going to take that and put that back on an Apple brand. So as a result, it became very, very clear that you would keep both. Now, in the beginning, all of the marketeers were like, well, we could do this and we could do that. And you're right. But I think sometimes we were very proud of being Irishly owned. We're very proud of being guaranteed Irish. And as a result, we didn't want to mess with that. And so we're not going to ever change the DID electrical brand. The Select Apple stores will stay the way they are because that's mono brand, right? As in they only sell one thing. Now, culturally, are we aligned? Yes. We're in the same HQ. We're all in the same offices. That all came together. We're in the same warehouse. We have a 78,000 square foot warehouse of our own in Fonthill, and our offices are part of that. And we've other storage solutions, of course, as well, but that's ours. We have 23 vans on the road at any one time and DID doing install. And that's not just delivery, that's physically going in and getting your dishwasher connected. So getting that and to getting that volume. So culturally, you do have challenges. Like one of the biggest challenges is that in our Apple business, we're very digital. In fact, we supply IT solutions to SMBs. So we're supplying SMB solutions to SMBs, but we had an age demographic in DID that was largely over the age of 45, right? And I'm putting myself in that bracket for a second, right? And I'm 44. And one of those age brackets is we are classified, whether we agree with it or not, as non-digital natives, which usually means that we're the dumb ones when it comes to technology, right? Anyone over the age of 45. It's just the way it goes. So we had rolled out digital training to all of our Select staff for years, which meant that there was very little face-to-face training. It was all via our app. And because of my master's in education, and here's a classic example of all the things that start coming in, we wanted to get a way of how we could get better training of all of our staff, vendor training, knowledge, sales training, but digitally. So how do you roll that out digitally to staff that are traditionally non-digital natives? Because that's the pushback, right? Culturally, we don't do it that way. Culturally, we've never done that way. But actually, I'm delighted that within the first 12 months, we actually have 100% compliance in all of the DID staff being digitally trained, even down to manual handling. And manual handling is quite difficult because it's usually quite present, but we record videos of all the manual handle training, and they submit videos to be assessed by certified manual handling trainers to make sure that they're doing everything right. We try to digitalize all that. That was a cultural shift, because that in itself actually proves that culture can change.
Your job as the CEO, I know you don't, we've talked about that you don't necessarily like that term, but I'm going to call you that. So your job as the CEO of this group, how would you kind of break it down into the various parts of the business and your kind of day to day?
My job, let's go back to the circus, I think. The juggler. Really, it's the juggler. I mean,
Not the ringleader?
yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think the juggler doesn't get half of the kudos they're supposed to. I think the juggler is the ringleader. It's the person that is literally the direction of every single ball. It controls them all, and at the same time they're all moving, and they can't fall down. Right. So, I think one, the juggler. Two, the vision. What's next? We as part of our values and our mission. One of our values is like, what's next, what's new, what's needed. And that's the bit of where I hope we're trying to move the dial. Why buy from us? Can we? Let's be different, and let's move there. So one of the jobs is, I think, is the vision is what is next, what is new, where are we going, what do I think that people need, and it's getting harder, right? So we have 2/3 of our revenue is retail. Classic retail, right? And I also include e-com in my classic retail bracket there, and then we have B2B, and then we have education. So there's 3 verticals for us, right? So let's just talk about retail for a second. Amazon Ireland is here, and an amazing employer. So nobody should be giving S bet them. They're an employer just like we are, right? They're a big employer just like we are. But our goal in life is trying to make sure that we keep it guaranteed Irish. We keep it Irish. We keep the taxes here. That's my way of thinking of the difference between massive, brilliant companies who are international coming in compared to the local Irish indigenous piece. And so, the challenge you would have is with any e-com is that you become a look and view in your retail store, but then they go off and just check and price and buy elsewhere. And so every single part of the job changes with every year something new comes in. And so our job is to make sure that when you do look and view, that we're the right price, the right place, the right stock, and the right time, with the right knowledge, the right experience, and that there's a why buy from us, that you do not leave and go off and need to buy anywhere else from us. And that's hard, because if you're selling a washing machine or a TV or a laptop or a sound system or a cooker, every single one of those is a different demographic profile. So that's the job, right? Is to figure out solutions for that every single day, and make sure that we're relevant for that. And then at the same time, make sure the logistics doesn't fall over. Make sure the marketing is doing their job. Making sure that e-com is there. Like we've a huge, significant e-com business, both in the UK and Ireland, both with different audiences. So,
does anything keep you up at night within that role?
Yeah. See, here's the thing, right? Wages keep me up at night. Of course they do, because I go back to that point that I consider that we've 600 odd mortgages to pay. Right? Yes, sure, they're rents, but that's the job, right? That's the responsibility. And I don't know how MD CEOs who have 4,000 to pay. I mean, just the level of responsibility is incredible. So that always keeps me up, right? Because that's a human part of it. And then it's the part of, why are you doing this? So are we doing it to make money? Well, of course, that's what every business is there for. Or do you want to move the dial? Do you want to just do something? And that's the bit that keeps me up, because that's the bit that drives me. Because otherwise you become irrelevant, right? And you're just part of another bit of where you could buy sweets in the same shop at the same price. So we try to create a different experience each time, and that's the important bit. And then it's also
what can we pause on that? What is that for you? So there's obviously making money. But what is what's the kind of meaning, the why for you?
I don't know, if I'm really honest. And I think it changes, right? Every 2 or 3 years, you bring a strategy together, and the strategy is going to be this, it's going to be that. If we're looking philosophically, which I think really, it's being meaningful we go and you go into a retail experience and it's different and it's you want to go there, you want to enjoy, you want to do it. That's what I call by moving the dial. That you're not just another replicate of something that could happen. Otherwise, why should they buy from you? Right? In a retail experience, like why do you go to those stores over Tesco? Well, I know my answer firstly, right? And it's a different experience for one and it's a different experience for another, right? So that's what we have to try and create. It's that different experience piece and be that meaningful piece from us. And then in Apple's a little bit different, right? Because that's very much driven by the Apple brand. And even the design of our Apple stores is done in Cupertino. So we don't get to design those stores. We get to build them and we get to operate them and we get to manage them. And that's really, really hard. So there's different things that drive the different parts of the business. I think the challenge for me at the moment now is the scale and size that we've got to. We actually have 3 verticals, right? And making sure all of those get the same amount of attention and importance. I think that's the bit that probably keeps me awake.
Take me back to the MBO. So the business is in examinership. You've been the CEO or the managing director of that business for a number of years at this point. COVID happens. And then the examiner is looking for, how are we going to get out of this? And you, together with your colleagues, come up with the plan to buy the business. I'm particularly interested here in what you saw on the business, because DID Electrical seemed to kind of fall into your lap. You got a knock on the door from the crowd in the UK. So what was it that you saw in the business as it currently was at that stage that you were confident to buy it?
Yeah, so I mean, there's 2 parts of that, right? The first bit is where you go back and say DID falls in your lap. There's Richard Branson talks about this a lot, where he says money attracts money. And that sounds like a very obnoxious statement, but it's actually a very true statement. What he means by that is that if you have money in your pocket, you're looking to spend it. If you don't have money, you're not looking to spend it. So opportunities come because you're actually willing to look and perceive them, right? So, which is a really important point. So, like when an opportunity like TAD comes up, we were looking, right? We may not necessarily be looking at that one, but we were looking, and I think that's the bit that works out really, really well. And also, if you're doing a good job, you're being noticed. So you have to be noticed for someone to knock. All right, so they're really important points in that, because it is luck, but it's also what drove that luck to get there, and it was what we're doing. So back to the MBO, I think the MBO it's a horrible time, right? Because you go back to the mortgages, you're worried about everything, and you're emotionally, definitely was probably one of the lowest points in my career, because you also feel like you failed. Now you had no control. I didn't control COVID, and I didn't control the government lockdowns, and I didn't control no international flights and not being able to be anywhere. But that would be the mentality if I thought that way, is that playing the victim. It's not. I can't control that, right? So what do I control? You control what's in my sight, right? So we're in this situation where we are. You're very down regardless, because you take it personally. Of course you do. You are the one that was leading the ship, and you are going down with the ship. You're still on the ship, right? And you don't know if the ship is going to float or not. So that's what the examinership brings you through. So you go through a process there where the examiner goes to the market, international market too, and we'll put a memorandum of understanding together, which is a pack to say this is what it is, this is what it looks like, and do you have an interest? You would do this in any acquisition, by the way. So it's quite similar, right? And they go out to the markets, and there was a number of people presented solutions and scenarios. And it's really interesting, because what are you feeling? Well, you're there going, oh, they could be my new boss. Oh, that could be my new boss. Oh, really don't want to work for them, right? And that's fine, by the way, because that didn't matter. You don't choose. So you decide not to work for them. The first thing you're feeling is, I'm out of a job.
Yeah.
Right? Not necessarily. Now, the mortgages are safe because they will naturally transition because of it. So you're going through lots of things. You're going through, do I want to work for them? I don't have a say, by the way. The examiner will decide the decision, but I will decide if I want to stay, right? And then you're going through, well, I might be out of a job tomorrow. Okay, that's fine. I'll probably find another one. And then you're going through, well, do you believe in this? Do you actually believe in this business? And the answer is, of course you do. Otherwise, I don't think I would have been there for the 6 years beforehand. So if you believe in it, why aren't you doing something about this? That's the first feeling, right? And then the second feeling is, well, there's no way I could do this in 100 days, because how are you going to raise the money? How are you going to pay for this? Do you want to take on all of this debt? Can you clear it all? Can you do it? You're back into the classic piece of every single part when you started the job on the very first day. I don't think I can do any of this, right? And you go through that. And that's the first feeling. Then the second feeling is excitement. What if? What if we did do this? What if we brought it to a new place? What if actually it works? And the third bit is all of this is exactly like buying your first house, by the way. Can you afford the mortgage? Do you want the mortgage? Do you love the house? Can you see yourself in it? Can you see yourself living there? Can I bring up my family there? It's all of those things, right? It's the exact same thing. And then you get to a place where you realize, oh, maybe we can do this. And then you hold on to that. That was the bit. The maybe you can is where we held on to it. And I think around the 40th or 50th day, we got to maybe we can. And then we had about 40 days to put our version on the table for them all to be submitted. And then we have no say, of course, right? They're the feelings.
What from a technical aspect, what did it look like then? You mentioned debt and everything else. Did you just go to a bank, ask for the money?
Yeah, well, actually, we were very lucky. We managed to do it. We self-financed the whole MBO, so we were able to go in, and I think that was quite an important part, which means we weren't bringing external debt in as part of it. So I think that was a really big piece. And then the last feeling you get is the keys to the house. That really cool, special feeling of going, wow, I own this now. Don't blow it up, right? So, and you get to work. But the funny part is, it was really interesting. It was kind of like renting a house that you finally buy. Nothing changed. Everything was the same the following day. The only difference was that your name was over, the deeds.
And was there a key priority for you? Your name's over the door and you have the keys. Was there something that you were like, okay, this is now what we need to sort out in order to be successful?
No, that was the good news. The good news is that the business would never have been there only for COVID. It was hopefully a one in a lifetime scenario that was out of control. We believed in it. It was a really good business. And by the way, 5 years later, look where we are. So clearly it was a really good business, right? So it was a moment in time that just no one had control of. It was bad luck for them, yeah.
Retail.
Yeah.
If the news and, everything I read is to be believed, is dead, and it's been dead for 30 years. It's since the internet came along. This high street retail thing is no more. Why is that? In your case, but also in your opinion, not correct?
Depends where you read the news. Half the time it's from online sources that are actually the business you're up against in the first place, right? Why is that not the case? Well, Select Ireland, let's just talk about that. It's up year on year, in a very healthy up year on year percentage. Well, that in itself is a statement, right? DID is massively up year on year. That in itself is a statement. So if the revenue is growing, well, there's something wrong with the narrative, right? Somewhere along there. The second bit then is retail's not dead. If it was dead, I mean, we're opening a brand new flagship store. So we opened a brand new DID flagship store at 14,000 square foot in Limerick 4 months ago. Doing phenomenally well. We're opening up another DID equivalent DID store in Killarney in 4 weeks' time. I'm opening a new flagship Apple retail store in 6 weeks' time in Maryhill in Birmingham. I've opened in partnership, so I say I because it's not mine, right? But the DID Essentials in partnership, we've opened 7 of those. We will have opened 7 of those by December 2025. If it was dead, then I am the stupidest person in the world to keep going and doing this. So 1, it's not dead. 2 is we see a huge growth in retail, classic retail. But 3, it is about the whole experience. And that is the question that has not always been answered. What is the retail experience? How is it happening? Is the product there? Can you have it? Is the experience good? Is the price right? Are you competitive? Are you beating the rest of them? And do you have all that information right now at a moment in time? And quite often that is not always the case in retail. And that's where the problems happen. If you have all that information, then there's no reason why that person should leave. We know that people are looking for experiential. It's coming in and being touching, feeling, and having something else. And if that experiential is so good, then it's a decision time. Have they got the money now, or are they coming back later? If they have the money now, then you also have the product now. Then there's no reason to leave, right? That's the difference. It's gone when they leave. So we spend more time trying to figure out why did they leave. Because revenue's up, both in Ireland. The UK's back. Revenue in the UK is slightly back, but that's a completely different profile of what's going on in the UK at the moment. More people are coming to the shops than ever before. People are very much into looking and feeling. And I think we have significantly benefited from the AliExpresses of this world. And what I mean by that is that we see these beautiful photographs of all these amazing products, and you buy them, and the quality ain't looking like the picture, and the touch and feel, and usually, not in all the cases, but usually it ends up in the bin. So AliExpress has actually led into exactly what is wrong with e-com. Now, there are, of course, amazing e-com experiences that will give it to you, but would you get that one negative one, then you want to go touch feel again.
Well, even something like, my wife, for example, likes luxury bags.
Yes.
Now she doesn't always have the money to be able to afford one. She saves up, and when she buys one, but when she buys that, she wants to go in and be sold, have the experience, try it on, see if there's another one that she likes, this kind of thing. And I think that in that market, it's obviously it's really important. But even for me, like, I love, I really dislike buying things online, because just if they don't fit, then I have to bring it down, I have to print off the thing to send it back and all the rest of it. And it just becomes a bit of an ordeal for me.
Yeah, but there's two parts to that, right? The challenge, going back to your wife for a second, to buy the bag. If your wife is being price conscious, and there are lots of people who are, and if she thought she could save 10%, she could use that retail experience as the experiential piece, but still go buy it elsewhere. So that's a really important part of this, that is, how do you capture that customer without the margin erosion, right? How do you capture without the margin erosion? Because the online experience has all of its own expenses, by the way. Reverse logistics. There's a reason why they're charging you for sending it back. You can lose your shirt on reverse logistics if you don't have a physical presence. The best thing about reverse logistics in retail is, if you have a physical presence, just bring it back. You bring it, no cost to us other than handling it. And okay, reverse on our side getting it back, right? So you've got to be careful in the margin erosion piece, right? And capturing that customer to make sure you do it in another way. And then the online experience, there definitely is a challenge around the reverse logistics. And, you're reading loads of stories now about serial e-com purchasers who buy 15 dresses to try on 15 and sell 14 back. And they're all getting banned from being able to purchase because the cost is actually extortionate. And retail traditionally is low margin, right? So, if you look at a product moving back and forward via an insured DPD, it could be, depending on size, right? So I'm picking numbers here, but it could be €11.50, €12.50 at cost. One way, insured. That's 20, there and back is 24 quid off, what, 100 quid item? If they make 24% margin on fashion, they probably do. Do they make 30%? Is there 6 left? So all of that comes into play.
During this time, we were talking before, is that you realised that you were quite deaf. Could you talk about that experience and how that all kind of interacted with this?
Yeah, I suffered from hearing ear infections all my life. Grommets when I was a kid, and I'm not sure. There's loads of kids have grommets when they're growing up, and just basically had ear infections all my life. And at the age of 20-ish, because I can't remember the exact year, I had something called chronic inner ear disease, which is basically a very nasty ear infection, which was kind of permanently living there. And I had to have something called a mastoid mastectomy, which is basically, they had to cut behind my ear, pretty gross, bring it forwards and go in and actually get to the eardrum and take out the disease in my eardrum. But as they did that, it was so connected to my eardrum that most of my eardrum came out. And as a result, on my right-hand side, I'm classified as partially single-sided deafness, as in I can still hear, but very little. So I'm deaf. And because my eardrum, if you consider a drum, when you're playing a drum, you hit the skin. That's what we call your outer ear. That vibrates the sound to the inner part of the drum. And the sound comes out of the base, which is the inner ear. In my case, the skin is gone and the middle is gone, but the drum is still there at the very, very base. So if sound comes in, it just gets distorted. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything, actually. So lived with it just as is. And then COVID comes along and I go to the bank. And as I go to the bank, for the very first time during COVID, the masks are all on, and I cannot hear a word the lady is saying behind the glass. And it registers with me as odds, but I couldn't. It took me a while to actually figure out that for donkey's years, I have clearly been lip reading of some sort. You know, I can't sit down and watch a TV with the sound off and tell you what's happening, but the minimum sound I was getting, I was connecting with the lips moving, and I was actually able to compensate. So when everybody had a mask on, I had no idea what they were saying. So I went back to the doctor, and I was like, okay, I think it's time. As a bald man, I need a hearing aid. And he goes, well, traditional hearing aids won't work for you because your ear is not going to capture the sound. So there's a very unique operation that they do in Ireland. I don't know the number, but I know it's in the 10 or 20s a year that they do it. And it's called a BAHA, a bone anchored hearing aid, where they basically put a pin in your head and you connect your hearing aid to the external part of the pin, also known as cochlear implant. That's a brand, so it's not actually a thing. And what basically happens is the sound vibrates all the way through the mastoid bone, and on the inner ear, I can hear.
Can you show the camera just I know it's on the other side, so that's it on the side of your head.
And
there.
It's pretty cool. It's got Bluetooth, it's got everything, and as a tech guy, it kind of fits my world.
But you can now hear better, you were saying, than
Yeah,
you ever could before.
Yeah, if I was in a restaurant now, there's a good chance I could hear the people at the end of the table where normal people can't. Now, sometimes the different sound environments messes that up and I can't hear anything. But yeah, so
amazing.
Yeah.
And I suppose when I first met you, you were always a technology enthusiast, and now you're a cyborg in some ways. You know, you've kind of brought everything together.
Yeah, I mean, my kids love it. The one thing I always remembered when I came home and actually having the hearing aid was turning to Gems, my wife, and saying, "Are they really that loud?" As in the kids, because they were dampened for a very long time.
Yeah.
That's the downside. The 4 kids, how loud they are. Yeah.
So over the course of your career and everything that's happened, we've kind of gone from creative magic into learning and development, into retail acquisitions. You know, it's really kind of gone full circle almost to the opposite. I'm interested about, in terms of magic, is there anything that you can kind of point to that you're using now, or that comes directly from that time in your life that comes into your day-to-day in some way now?
Yeah, I think I would put an awful lot of who I am, where I've come from, for that first day of meeting Quentin and where I got to all the skill sets. But it's the life skill sets, the day-to-day skill sets. You know, being able to get up on stage and talk to 3,000 people without an ounce of a sweat of a bead off my head of worry or concern is a very powerful skill set. Very powerful. Like when we look at some of the top fears in the world, you know, and I've got one of them, spiders, right? Spiders, right? And the fear of death and public speaking, they're all up there, right? And different reports what to give you, right? So to be able to have a skill set for one of the biggest fears in the world that links directly into your job, to be able to come in and hold a room, to make the eye contact, to be able to have those conversations, that is probably the most empowering thing. However, at the same time, it's a shield, right? And what I mean by that is what magic gave you was the ability to portray that, to stand up and be something. Doesn't mean that you actually are that. We were talking earlier, like the thought of me going into a cinema and watching a movie on my own in public, I was like, I couldn't do that. But me getting up on stage and talking to whoever, not a problem, right? So I think what magic allowed me to do certainly was to create a character. And you would do that on stage, right? You would have a certain style or presence as where the gags would come from, depending on what you were doing. So it was to be able to create a character and then allow that character to develop a shield. So if something goes wrong, well, that was the character's fault. Now, it's not a form of having 2 brains or 2 minds and 2 things. It's a little shield to be able to go and do that. So those skill sets, to be able to take them in and then come into the business world and be able to put yourself out there and have that little shield, it's pretty magical. Excuse me the pun, but it gives you that little bit of confidence without misplacing that as ego.
You know, it's interesting for me, having had a background in magic as a kid and throughout, I suppose, my early 20s. the only other similar group I found to magicians, and this is going to sound strange maybe, are actually investors, right? Because little does anyone know, but the amount of thought and learning and reading, like you can tell just by, listening to you, that there's so much deep thought has gone into not only the craft and the skills behind magic, but also the crowd control. There's a huge amount developing a character. Like I remember, Darwin Ortiz had this book, Strong Magic, and there was a huge, I think a chapter in it all about developing a character. Now I remember reading that book, when I was a teenager, and my dad thinking, and it's like a big, textbook, hardback, and it was like, this is how, the kind of intricate. It was like reading a textbook on magic, and for me anyway, I've never come across a group of people. Since, aside from investors, that think just so deeply about how the world works, how people, and I suppose a model for how to be in the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, 3-4 years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and which means I always had it, right? Which is fascinating for me because you don't just have it; you've always had it. It's who you are. It's you're born. It's the neurons, the way they're wired. And for me, it really helped me to just get to a place to go, ha, that's why I do that. All right. That's why. And for ADHDers, certainly, if you talk to them, deep thinkers, entrepreneurs, by the way, a lot of them do have ADHD, deep thinkers, deep analyzing, constantly reassessing, and actually constantly replaying, going back over that meeting 20,000 times. Could I have done it better? Should I have done it better? That has a direct correlation to magic shows, right? Which now doesn't surprise me when I think about it, is when you were doing a magic show and you were performing, an actor would do the same thing, but when you're performing, how did I do that day? How did I do in that show? Did I deliver that line correctly? Was the gag land right? Did everybody laugh in the right way? If I said it this way, would it be different? And it's that deep thinking thing, right? So I think performers have it by default. ADHDers definitely have, or ADD, depending on whichever form it fits into. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs actually are neurodiverse, right? So I think that also fits into the piece. But then that's kind of like saying, oh, sure, we just label everybody with the same label, right? No. It just happens that those traits are quite similar, and those traits produce a character, and that character seems to fit into the world that you and I work in.
It's interesting to say that I actually was diagnosed with ADHD a number of years ago as well. Yeah.
No.
It's
the
funny
ADHD
because,
club here.
but it's funny, but you're now the third or fourth person that I've had on the podcast that have said that, and we've now had this chat about, ADHD.
I didn't know
podcast.
that. Okay.
Yeah. When I was it was just when my son was born, so it was only a couple of years ago or whatever. But very much an eye opener for me, and also just that I just think that self knowledge piece that you were talking about there. This is why, and it's just it's a window into why things are.
But it is because, and like, I knew nothing about this until 4 years ago. Like, I didn't care. But I care really much now because it allows me to be a little bit more forgiving on myself rather than harder on myself, right? And one thing that really surprised me was this thing called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And basically, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's where people with ADD have a tendency to take rejection a lot harder than anyone else, just the way their brain, they overanalyze. And that is a disaster at work. If you're trying to lead and be a business leader and you don't get all the highs and you're getting the lows, but you're trying to stay high. So they were the kind of things that became real eye-opening for me. But that's what I meant the shield comes up. And that's where actually the magic has actually come in and helped me with that, where I can still go into the room while I might have just taken rejection I hear on whatever it was, right? I'd take that just too personally, to come back in and put that little acting shield up and go into the room and nobody knows.
Like, I think that the self-kindness piece is huge because you really can forgive yourself for I think before I found out, it was very much I'd forget something, or so a typical ADHD moment, I would zone out and I've missed what my boss is telling me to do, and now
my biggest fear is making sure I hear your question, right?
But that is,
and
that is
it happens just zoned out for 2 minutes to come back again.
Yeah, because it just that's the way it is, right?
Can't do anything about it.
And beforehand, yeah, exactly, I can't do anything about it. So beforehand I would have been, and now I can kind of excuse sometimes, actually. I was thinking about something else there. Can you
Look,
remind me?
the other big thing, and then I know most people don't like talking about it, is when I got diagnosed, the question was, do you want to take medication for it or not? And I was like, medication? I got here without it, right? That was what was going through my head. So I don't need it. I said, no. This doesn't change your personality. And that was, I was thinking, like, it's going to change your personality. And then I was like, well, what if it's addictive? I'm like, I don't want that. And it's like, no, it's not that either. And actually, so I opted to take it, and game changing for me. And the way I would describe it was all of a sudden that my brain was allowed to breathe a little bit of extra fresh air because it was constantly going. It's constantly gone. So, yeah.
Ciaran McCormack, thank you very much for coming in, and it's been even better than I thought it was going to be, and it's great to see you again. It's been so long, so thank you very much for coming in, and we wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thanks for having me.